92 through 97. I already took the homework, I forgot to put it on. Sorry, Jimmy Clinton. So I'll give you a minute. Or you can pause the video, Jimmy
We're having
Clinton.
a quiz.
How do we know they're not studying for the whole entire time? That's completely unfair.
We're having a quiz.
Their parents said it not. But use your time profitably. Bless you.
I get moist. I was going to do another.
Are we gonna review before the theoretical quiz?
Maybe. Is that the theoretical homework pages?
Let's see, it's Friday.
I theoretically don't know.
Oh, that's a bummer. You should probably figure that
I
out.
theoretically don't know the theoretical page of the theoretical quiz, maybe theoretically covering.
It sounds like
You
you're
know,
wasting a lot of your
theoretically.
time. though.
Theoretically.
I don't give any theoretical.
What's the homework?
Who is Edmund Randolph?
Oh, it's, I was saying.
1 through 9 on page 97. Yes.
Is Alexander Hamilton the one the Hamilton movie is based off of?
Yes. No, he did take a lot of liberties with it, but he did do a lot of factual checks as well for it. So remember this: some things are right and some things are creative liberties, and he is taken in it. But yes, the Alexander Hamilton movie is based on a lot of Alexander Hamilton's life. And
Who
the
is
life of
Alexander
Hamilton.
Hamilton?
Watch
You will find out.
Hamilton.
The Paris Commission.
He invented the
Why?
light bulb.
PG-13 because of
What?
customers and stuff.
Hamilton?
No.
What did you
Oh,
say?
that's what you were saying. I thought you were saying you were telling him to watch it.
I was like,
So. No.
Invented the light bulb.
Alright, go ahead, take out a piece of paper, pen and a pencil, finish your question. No, because it's a reading quiz. So, alright, piece of paper, hurry. I'm gonna right now, let's go. Flip, go.
Fair quiz.
Yep, piece of paper, pen and pencil.
You gave it away when you said you haven't been studying.
What?
You gave it away that you're having a quiz when you said you haven't been studying.
You should have studied.
I did.
Right.
I had no thing.
Always try, Bretty.
I'll try my best.
Always try, you never know.
Do I have
Two
this
piece of
quiz?
paper, I guess one piece of paper.
Is this quiz gonna be omitted if he gets really digressed since he wasn't here?
He should always try his best no matter what.
Well,
Yeah, frickin'.
I know, but like, I mean,
That's not working, you're not working. Don't worry about it.
but he's my
Isn't
home.
it pretty? It's very pretty. Alright, number 1. Alright,
This is a red
alright.
pen.
What quiz is this?
I believe this is quiz 12. So you're getting up there. Tipping along.
How many?
5. Reading quizzes are
What's
always
it
good.
at? 18.
It is the
The
18th. 18th, still the 18th. Number 1. Who became the first president of the United States? Always try. Always try. Who became the first president of the United States? Number 2. Who is known as the father of the Constitution? Who is known as the father of the Constitution? Number 3. What state was the first to ratify the Constitution? You have a 1 in 13 chances of guessing.
50.
No, because we only have 13 at this time. So, what state was the first to ratify the Constitution? What compromise established 2 houses in the national government? What was the name for that compromise that established 2 houses in the national government? Number 5. If you supported the Constitution, what was the term that they referred to you as? So what were the people, like what did they call themselves if they supported the Constitution?
Let's start with.
I'm not telling you.
Oh, come on.
Nope, reading quiz.
Can you,
Nope.
repeat it?
What do you call, what term refers to the people that supported the Constitution? So if you supported the Constitution, what did they call themselves? It's not really a party, because it's not quite a party yet, but like, what do we call it? No, not like that. Alright, anyone need anything else repeated?
Alright, let's go read class.
100.
Alright, go ahead and take up your homework now again, and pass it to me, that combined
Can I say the answer out loud?
For which one?
Number 5.
No, because just in case they haven't taken it yet,
Well, they should have taken
they
it.
should
You
have
guys-
taken it, but just in case we can't talk about the quiz answers, so as we go through the homework, you may realize, oh, then just make a note and you'll figure out most of the answers from that.
You don't
Alright,
understand
so
how.
no, raise your hand. Is it a quick question, Chris? I gotta go. How about you today?
Yes.
Is it a
Was
question
that,
for real?
yes, yes.
Yes.
Was that meant to be the easiest quiz of all time?
No, but mainly I wanted to check to make sure, are you doing your homework properly? And we're getting to a point where there's a lot of terms and definitions, so it's one of those, some of them were kind of easy, like I really hope everyone knew who the first president was. But it's one of those, remember we get to the entrance, but it's one of those where, okay, some of them, as you're going through your reading, you should be applying it and like trying, and like you don't have to understand everything yet, but you should be able to try to understand of, okay, I can recognize at least the basics from this section. Alright, number 1, so again, we can't talk about quiz answers, but we do go over your homework. Who is known as the father of the Constitution? Genesis.
James Madison.
Good job, James Madison. Number 2, give the year of the Constitutional Convention and who presided over the event. I gotta keep breaking, sorry. Alright.
George Washington.
Good job, what was the year?
1787.
Good job, what's in your mouth?
Nothing.
Okay, let's not do that.
1787.
Number 1787.
1787.
Sorry, 1787. Name the plan of government proposed by Edmund Randolph. Ethan. Number 3. Number 3. Name the plan of government proposed by Edmund Randolph.
The Virginia plan was proposed by Edmund Randolph.
Number 4. Name the plan of government proposed by William Patterson. We'll start with you and go backwards.
Can I say it?
If he can't find it.
William Patterson proposed the United Caramel Plan.
The what?
United Caramel Plan.
Not quite. Alright.
What? What?
New Jersey plan.
You said caramel?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you were saying. So,
Is it
New
the bike
Jersey.
from Caramel?
United Caramel Plan.
The what? Alright, so the name for it is the New Jersey plan for it. So, nope, New Jersey plan. Make a note the name for it. Alright, we'll go back to you. That way you can redeem yourself. Number 5. What compromise established 2 houses in the national government?
The commerce.
And slave trade compromise. Regulate commerce.
So the Commerce and Slave Trade Compromise established 2 houses in the national government?
Yes.
Nope. Alright.
The Great Compromise.
The Great Compromise. Or the Connecticut Compromise. Either one of those answers is fine and acceptable. Number 6. Name the measure that empowered Congress to regulate commerce with certain limitations. Ethan, what did you have?
Number 7.
For number 6.
The commerce and slave trade compromise.
There
Oh,
you go.
Wait,
That's-
number 5. I read number 6.
I was wondering. Okay, but yes, number 6 is the Commerce and Slave Trade Compromise. Alright, number 7. Number 7, Genesis. What did the Federalists support? Good job. And why did the Anti-Federalists oppose them?
Oh, me? Oh.
Yeah, so we're on the same question.
Oh, I knew that. The anti-federalists opposed because they believe we need a new form of government because the country was gonna die.
They opposed it because they didn't want a new form of government?
They did.
Okay, so the Constitution was a new form of government, but they were worried about the states losing power. We'll talk about the reasons why for it once we get into it. Alright, number 8. Which state was the first to ratify the Constitution? You find it yet, Brecken? Okay.
Delaware.
Yep, Delaware wanted to be first! That was the whole reason of ratifying it first. They wanted it just to be the first state. And then, number 9. Who became the first president of the United States? Chris.
I got 2 questions.
I'm sorry.
George Washington was the first president.
Good job. Alright, go ahead and put that away. Pick it up, 1 piece of paper. Okay, we gotta keep going. 1 piece of paper, pen and pencil. So that way you can keep track of stuff you don't know.
Whoa!
Alright, but you should be ready to, because you haven't had a review yet.
You give us 2 quizzes?
I'm gonna have to for junior high for the next week. They've not been doing good enough on their reading quizzes, so they're gonna do these quizzes every day next week. Probably, they just don't know it yet.
They're little squirts.
Alright, wait, we gotta keep going. Alright, so think it over. Nice. We're gonna just the palm game right now because I have to move. So I'm sorry. Alright, so what was the state that submitted their new state constitution to their people to ratify it? Because and then every state after them decides to go ahead and copy that as well. Go. That was Chris.
Massachusetts.
Good job, was Massachusetts. Alright, what is the term that refers to a bicameral house? Go.
Huh?
Wait,
What
what?
is the term referred to a bicameral house? Chris, got it again?
Let's start with
B.
B.
Oh, I said it. I'm sorry. I put it down.
So do I get the
Caramel.
next question?
No.
I don't get the next question even though I got it?
No, this is my favorite. Let's go.
Nope. Alright, let's see who wrote the Articles of Confederation. Who wrote the Articles of Confederation? Go.
Me.
Okay, what did you
What's
put?
it start with?
D.
I know this. Daniel.
You go Daniel? Its last name starts with D. Hope this is D.
Daniel.
No, alright, you're next.
Starts with a D.
Starts with D, last name.
Is he famous?
You've already seen his name. You're next.
Delaware.
Nope. Dickinson, John Dickinson. Write down, if you didn't know. Write down, John Dickinson. Alright, what do you call it? What type of government is it whenever the central government is subordinate to the local governments?
What?
What type of government is it whenever the central government is subordinate or beneath the, what did I say? Local governments, so the state governments. Go. It's Chris Bailey, because you're fast.
What is
It starts with C.
C?
C.
Common.
You go common?
Yes.
Nope. Alright, Egan's next.
Common house.
You go with that?
Yes.
Nope. Alright, you better put it over here. Nope.
Central House.
Nope.
Get it right.
Confederacy. Confederacy is whenever the central government is subordinate or beneath the local governments. Alright. There were 3 problems with the Articles of Confederation. Name one. Go.
They didn't have judges.
Yeah, they didn't have an executive or judicial branches. What's another problem? Go. Okay.
Say the question again.
What's another problem with the Articles of Confederation? Didn't have a president or judges. That's one problem.
What does one start with?
Their sentences.
Yeah. In,
Oh.
and I guess in, I don't know, in a sentence.
Was one of them that, some people were left out? Like, they only got one vote in the entire thing? Like, the bigger states only got one vote?
That is like a sub-point underneath it, but there's a larger problem. Two large problems.
They didn't have as much representation as they did one.
Okay, that's not quite one. Alright, are you alright, Genesis?
There were not enough people in the building.
Nope.
They didn't have the power tax.
That's another major one. So they couldn't have, so because they didn't have the ability to tax in this time period. And then also, you had to have 9 states to approve a measure before it had to be passed by Congress, or you had to have all 13 to amend it. So you're right, there was a problem with the voting, but that's a side issue. Alright, what was the ordinance that divided up the Northwest Territory into townships? Go. That one's Ethan.
The ordinance of Northwest Territory.
17.
85.
So, Northwest Ordinance of 1785.
1787. No.
Final answer.
Yes.
No.
The Northwest Ordinance of 17. What did he say?
Nope. That's not what he said.
1785.
So, Northwest Ordinance of 1785.
Yes.
No. Alright, what else am I guess?
That's the other one.
Land Ordinance of 1785. Land Ordinance 1785. Alright, what was the other ordinance then that divided up that territory into no more than 5, no less than 3 states? So they're saying how many states would come out of it. Go. I think you barely got it, but it was really close.
Northwest Ordinance of 1787.
Good job. Alright. Okay, I think that's as far as we got. But as a side note, you must choose what today, Genesis?
What are they called?
Federalist essay. Yeah, Federalist papers or Federalist essay. What, who had 3 points or more just now?
Not me.
Alright, looks like even. Alright, which one? 51? Yeah. Which one?
51.
Which one? Which one?
We're all
Alright.
gonna cheat off of each other.
No, you're not. Alright,
They are.
so make sure that we're done. When's the rough draft?
The Monday after next.
Yeah, so not like this coming Monday, but it's the following Monday. So make sure you are thinking over it and looking over it.
So
Alright.
wait, now that we picked, can you tell us the one that you recommend? That you recommended?
Either one of them is good and either one of them is fine. So no, I'm not gonna tell you which one I would pick because I
We
don't want
can't
you to
change
feel.
it now, just I wanna know which one you recommend.
I just don't want you to feel like, oh, I picked the wrong one.
No, we won't do that.
We won't.
Like that.
No.
I don't feel that way, right?
We're gonna change it until she says that.
She probably didn't have one.
No, I do.
84.
I'm just not telling you. I know which one I would choose, but I know which one I could talk the most
It's the
about.
one me breaking it out.
It's number 10, because number 10 is the largest.
We're all
I'm not
done.
telling you. Alright,
I'm a
yes,
favorite.
Brecken.
When's the variable? When do we need to know it? I forgot.
Next
Wait,
Wednesday.
number 10 is the largest?
10's the larger one.
I thought 51 was the largest.
No. Alright, we are going to turn on the sun. I'm going to leave a blank so that way some of you won't distract it. If you need to look at it, I would highly recommend you look at it. You should hopefully kind of start being able to
I
have it
already
like at
memorized
this
the whole
point.
entire thing.
Yeah.
Cause I like songs.
So if you get, but we're gonna play it through probably just one time right now because I have a bunch of videos that I want to share today. So I want to make sure.
Really?
I have a couple. I have two, but they're kind of long. So I'm gonna share we get to them. All right, so be following along on page, I believe 536. If you don't have it memorized quite yet, or if you don't have it copied down yet, Ethan, you got it memorized? You got
More or
to
less.
get it out. So make sure.
What page?
I just need to look over it.
536, I believe.
Mine's pretty long.
We sang. They're not going to rock me out.
Can I get everything lights off and stuff? Can
What?
I get everything lights off?
Sure. Alright, so whenever it starts, you can start along with it.
Want me to close the door?
Sure. We the people are in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty, to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Told you I knew it.
You know, alright, so go ahead and look over your textbooks. Now, if we have time, we'll talk about it at the end, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to get through this. Alright, you may get the lights again, Chris. Alright, so, Shays Rebellion. We talked about this very loosely yesterday. With Shays Rebellion, it was because the governments were requiring the state, or the people,
I was gonna say what?
to pay back their debts. But because there was no regulated currency, 91, we're not quite there yet. So a lot of the farmers were not getting paid, and so they were struggling to pay back their debts. And since they were struggling to pay back their debts, they were having their farms foreclosed on. Daniel Shays, he was a former military officer, so he basically led a rebellion in Massachusetts. Seems like Massachusetts is always having trouble in this time period. But there was other little like rebellion section. He just led one of the large ones. So he forced down several courts to close in western Massachusetts because he said, okay, courts are causing foreclosure. We're gonna close down the courts. That'll solve it. So it's one of those, okay, I see part of the problem, and that's part of the solution, but you need to get the laws or change or have the tax base change instead for it. It was only when though that they went to go get an arsenal, to go get more weapons. That's whenever they had to send over basically the state militia to go. I'm gonna go stop it because you can't have people just taking the law into their own hands. It doesn't work. It leads to anarchy, and it'll basically divide and mess up your country. So that's the reason why they got very freaked out by Shays Rebellion. So this is a memorial. Now, not for him, because he's not buried here, but this is just saying this is the last battle of Shays Rebellion was here. Just pointing out that people were realizing the Articles of Confederation is not working. Now, a lot of people understood, okay, we need to fix the problem with the farmers because they're partly right. They shouldn't have they shouldn't have their farms be foreclosed because the currency isn't working out. But at the same time, they can't just decide we're gonna just all rise up in rebellion either. Your country won't work that way. So we need to come up with a better solution. And this convinced a lot of the American forefathers and a lot of the American people we need to do something. The Articles of Confederation isn't working. We're having problems. People are getting angry, and we need to hurry and fix this. Otherwise, we could potentially have a whole other war on our hands. Alright, now next page. So your book points out as well that the critical period, you make a note of the date at the top of the page, 1781 to 1789 is called for the critical period of American history because this was right after the War for Independence. So for the country deciding how are we going to actually run our country. Whenever the Constitution was finally proposed in 1787, Washington said, should the states reject this excellent Constitution, the probability that an opportunity will never again offer to cancel another peace. The next will be drawn in blood. Washington saying that if we reject our written Constitution, the next Constitution we write will probably be drawn in blood, meaning that we'll probably be fighting a civil war or some other conflict to determine how we're going to run our country. So a lot of people understood at the end of this time period that we need to do something. Articles of Confederation isn't working, so we have to have a better document or a better version of government. Alright, so what to do with the Constitution? This is a picture of James Madison as a side note. So, Constitution is adopted. So, Virginia and Maryland originally were having disputes over who could control the Potomac River, and so since there was no federal government to say who controls which trade, they were arguing over it. So Washington invited representatives from both the states to meet at his house at Mount Vernon, and both the delegates agreed and sat down over what they would do on West the River. That meeting was so successful that they said, okay, we should try this again in 1786, the next year, to try to discuss what to do with the Articles of Confederation. It was disappointing though, because only 5 sent delegates. Now remember, under the Articles of Confederation, how many states had to be represented in order to change it? Genesis. So Ken, did you do anything with 5?
No.
Nope, you just sit around awkwardly and you can't do it. So they said, okay, this didn't work out. No real business can actually be accomplished. We don't have a quorum or a correct number for it. Alexander Hamilton, same guy, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, they said, okay, we want to try this one more time though. Not enough people should at this time, but next year let's try this again, so that way we can try to see what can we do to fix the problems for it. So they called to have another convention the following year. This is the time period of Shays' Rebellion. So once the other states started hearing about Shays' Rebellion, they realized, oh, we don't want this to spread to our states. We don't want to have our people to get so unhappy and have problems. We start having rebellions too. We're going to send somebody next year to go ahead and try to see what can we do to fix the Articles of Confederation. So your book points out again that Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, they called the following year's convention the Philadelphia Convention because they're meeting in Philadelphia. Every state sent delegates except for Rhode Island. Anyone think they know why Rhode Island didn't send anybody? It's more of a thinking question. Your book does not tell you. Okay.
Because they're different.
Partly.
Because of what?
What is it? Because they're different. But I mean, they had a suspicion.
War.
Not quite there. That would be extreme, but not quite. All right. They like the Articles of Confederation and the Articles of the Confederacy, and so they said, no, we don't want these changed. We think you guys are going to try to change them, so we don't want to get involved in that. They're right. As a side note, they did decide. They did decide to go ahead and change it. So once you had the Philadelphia Convention, your book points out as well that traditionally we call this a constitutional convention today. Originally, it was just supposed to meet just to revise the Articles of Confederation. But once all the delegates got there, they all agreed, no, the Articles of Confederation aren't going to work. We need to revise the whole thing and start over and start from scratch. So traditionally, we call it the Constitutional Convention. They did not call it that at the time. So to make a note, the Constitutional Convention happened in Philadelphia. There were 55 people that went there in total. They were not there all together at the same time, but there were 55 total people that ended up going for it. George Washington and Benjamin Franklin were the two most respected individuals there. Washington, now why was Washington respected in this time period? I don't say first president yet, because he's not there yet. Okay, Genesis. Yeah, and so people understood, oh, if Washington's going, then this must be a serious thing, because Washington's going to be there. So this must be serious. Benjamin Franklin, why was it important that Benjamin Franklin was going? Anyone think they know? Okay?
He's a genius.
Yeah, and he was also old. He was 81. That's old by today's standards. That's real old by back then standards. So
it's like 100 being 100 today.
It would probably be pretty close. The average lifespan, if I remember correctly, in this time period was around 55. So being 81 was one of those. And so again, being older, a lot of people understood. Oh, if he's going, if George Washington's going, this would be a very serious thing. So we're all going. So we're going to treat it as a serious endeavor. So just make a note of the books people went. Your book points out that the average age of the person there was about early 40s, was about the average age for them. The youngest one was Jonathan Dayton. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. To make a note of James Madison, he's known as the father of the Constitution. He was the person that helped write much of it, not Thomas Jefferson. A lot of people assume Thomas Jefferson. What did Thomas Jefferson write? Someone raise your hand and tell me, or lead the committee.
The Constitution? No. What was it? Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, Declaration of Independence. So a lot of people still, okay, so remember, Thomas Jefferson wrote Declaration of Independence. So James Madison, he wrote or led the committee for the Constitution. So just make a note for him, for it. He also took a lot of notes over what happened in the Constitutional Convention. He basically kept a diary or a logbook over what was said, And so that's how come we know what the different founding fathers said and what they discussed, was he kept basically a running record book over what were the different points that they were discussing. Now, they did not tell people at the time. Okay,
Where is it?
wherever his logbook is probably in some special like government building to keep it safe. But the Declaration of Independence is it's in Washington D.C. I don't remember the exact building because there's so many buildings in Washington D.C. I don't remember which one is specifically is in.
It's in the actual original Constitution.
The Declaration of Independence.
Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, and the Constitution. They're both kept safe because we still have both the documents.
How are they not like oxidized though?
They keep them in a very like special like case. They kept them on display in a courthouse for a long time until someone decided, we probably shouldn't do that. These are important documents. We should probably keep these safe. And everyone was like, you're probably right. So we probably should have to keep them in special cases now. Like to go see the Declaration of Independence. They told us you can't use flash photography because just the flash on like your camera, they're worried about that causing the ink to fade now. So it's one of those, we're trying to keep it as like preserved as possible because it is so
Does it
old.
look good?
I mean, you can still read it, but it's faded ink now. But you can still make out John Hancock and like the other signatures. I don't know if you can read each individual word because they wrote kind of small back then. But as long as you can still tell what it is.
How do you see can you go see it? You can,
There's not a rope?
No, like you have to like wait in the line to get in.
how big's the line, do you think?
For us, for me, the day that I went, it was like 2 or 3 hours, but I was with a school and we were on a school like school trip. I'm not telling you, we gotta go. Okay.
Isn't it like Kevin's own building where if you look at the roof, there's just hangings and stuff?
That's the Library of Congress. I don't remember if it's in that particular building or not, but that's the one I think.
I just remember going in, like, dark lights all around.
Yeah, it is
very.
great. They keep it at like a certain like candlelight setting because they're worried about regular lights like room and here damaging the paper. So they're trying to keep it as like preserved as possible. Alright, just bringing up James Madison and the father of the Constitution for it. Alright. Alright, your book points out that some of our political leaders at the time weren't involved in this. Like Thomas Jefferson was not involved at the Constitutional Convention because he was over in France being an ambassador. You also had John Adams and Thomas Paine. They were in Britain, so again, they were also gone for it. Patrick Henry, he did not want to go because Patrick Henry liked the Articles of Confederation, so he said, I don't want to go because I'm suspicious you guys are going to change it, so I'm not going. So Patrick Henry, he was one of the anti-Federalists. We'll talk about him later on, but he said that he did not want the Articles of Confederation to be rewritten or redone. Alright, so just make a note that the Constitutional Convention began in 1787, so make a note for that date, which is the date that you need to know. So, 1787, make a note for it. It was supposed to begin on May 14th, it didn't happen because they didn't have that quorum yet. So they started a little bit later. They met in Pennsylvania State House. We call it today Independence Hall. So again, that's what we renamed it. But at the time, it was Pennsylvania State House. They also chose George Washington to preside over the convention because everyone respected George Washington. They also agreed almost immediately that they would keep it secret. They would not go home and discuss what they were talking about or tell family members or tell reporters. Why do you think that they agreed to all keep it secret with the idea that they are revising the Articles of Confederation or scrapping them and starting all over?
Isn't was that thing where people could report stuff about the government and then it would go everywhere and then people would basically mad and
Yeah, that was basically it. They did not want people to judge what they're working on right now. They wanted to come up with a fully finished document and then present that to the people. So it wasn't like George Washington was trying to be sneaky, but it was the idea of, okay, we need to discuss how we can make the best form of government, and we don't want a bunch of people bothering us about it and giving us their opinions right now. We need to make sure we come up with the best version right now, just between us. And then once we get it perfect as best as we can, then we will present it to the people and then we can vote on it. So sometimes you hear people talk about how, oh, it was a secret. Oh yeah, that's kind of how like whenever you're working on like an art, or if you're working like writing a story or any type of artistic expression, you typically don't show it to someone in like the halfway process because it looks bad. You want to wait till it's entirely done before you show it. So kind of like the same idea. Alright, anyone have any questions about this so far? Alright, so later on, the next page for it, with the Great Compromise for it. So the delegates, they were trying to discuss what are some of the things to discuss and what are some of the ways we can come up with our Constitution. Alright, so your book points out one of the major kind of first proposals with the compromises was trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to vote in Congress? The first one was Edmund Randolph. He proposed the Virginia Plan as it became known. He said he called for a bicameral legislature, but it was based on state population. Just say, okay, your votes are determined by the number of people that you have in your state. It did call for a executive and judicial branch as well for it. Basically, that was the main idea for this one, was it was Congress would be based off state population. Now, which states would be benefited if it's based off state population? The larger states or the smaller states? Genesis. Yeah, so the smaller states said, I don't like this plan. You're giving a lot of power to the larger, more populated states. I don't like this. So William Patterson, he came up with a different plan known as the New Jersey Plan. It called for a unicameral for one House legislator. And he said every state gets one vote. Doesn't matter if you have a lot of people or not. Every state should be on equal footing. So which states does that benefit? The large states or the small states? Chris? Small states. That's how come this one was also known as the small state plan. So they're saying, okay, well, how do we have a compromise? We want to make sure that the small states aren't overrun, but at the same time, there's more people in the large states, so they should have more. They should have more of a vote. So what do? Your book points out Franklin's wisdom and what he said. Oh, I skipped over George Washington's quote too by accident, top of page 44. Who wants to read George Washington's quote? All right, Chris. 44 at 94.
Where?
Okay, 94, see like the black quote at the top of the page?
Oh yeah. It is too probable.
Yep, that's it.
It is too probable that no plan we propose will be adopted. Perhaps another dreadful conflict is to be sustained. If it to please the people we offer what we ourselves disprove, how can we afterwards defend our work? Let us raise a standard to which the wise and honest can repair the offense and hand it up.
Yeah, so you say, okay, we want to try to make it as best as we can. If we don't like it, nobody else will like it. So we say we should make it as best as we can and then present it to the people, but ultimately it's in the hands of God. But we should do our best to put this forward. Alright, who wants to read Benjamin's quote now on page 94? Alright, Ethan.
I have lived, sir, a long time, and I longer lived the more convicted proof I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of man, and if the sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his nose, it is probable that an empire can rise without his aid. We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, and they have remained built.
Good job. This is one of the few times we see Benjamin Franklin actually speak during the Constitutional Convention. Because he was so old, he would write out what he wanted to say and then give it to someone else to actually tell everybody because he couldn't project or speak very well. But as you had the delegates arguing over like the different plans, with the New Jersey plan or the Virginia plan, he got to his feet and he started to speak himself, which when everyone else saw, oh, Benjamin Franklin's standing up. Shut up, Benjamin Franklin's about to speak. Everyone else got quiet, just understanding, oh, Benjamin Franklin feels this strongly about something, so he's getting ready to personally speak, give him respect. Now, he basically said that we should start with prayer, saying we're doing a monumental task. We should ask for God's protection and God's wisdom as we're doing this. Now, sometimes you hear people talk about how Benjamin Franklin, he may not have been a Christian, but definitely understood the Bible and understood what the Bible said. And he understood that God does govern in the affairs of men, and he understood that they needed God's help. Alright, anyone have any questions about this so far? We're talking about the Great Compromise. Alright, the Great Compromise. It was also known as the Connecticut Compromise. Either name is fine for it because the Connecticut delegates kind of helped springboard it and kind of came up with this. They said we're going to have two houses, or two parts, two Congress. You're going to have the Senate, and then you're going to have the House of Representatives. The Senate is made up, the Senate is based on just the number of states. So every state today has how many senators? Someone raise your hand and tell me. This is the same today. Alright, Chris?
16.
Nope, not
One.
16. Nope.
It's 2.
2! Every state has 2 senators. So how many senators total do we have in the Senate today?
75.
Real? Okay. 100. What happens if we get an extra state? How many senators will we have? 102. So as of right now, because we have 50 states, we have 100 senators because each state gets 2. If the question right, you only have it. Okay.
Is it possible for us to get other states?
We can. Puerto Rico occasionally votes on it. I mean, about every 10 years. But again, people like the idea of having 50 states. So, is it illegal to get another state? No, but at this time, it's one of those where people like it, and again, Puerto Rico has to decide first that they want to come in as a state, and then Congress has to approve them, so it's not like they automatically just get to come in. Okay.
Can I say something to her about
Nope,
that?
we gotta keep going. I'm trying to hurry up and talk quick so we can watch our videos. I'm trying, but I don't know if I'll make it, but I'm trying. Alright, so you have the lower house. The lower house is made up of state population. This is the House of Representatives. Does anyone know what your parents probably filled out this year, probably already filled out, to determine with the idea of state population? Okay.
The census.
The census. That's the reason why where you saw billboards and reminders everywhere, just reminding you to fill out the census. Everyone counts.
Those
Fill
people
the
that
census.
keep knocking on our door.
Yeah, to make sure you filled it out. It's because that's what determines how many House Representatives your state gets. So the state of Georgia, if you live in Georgia, wants everyone to make sure that everyone is counted. If you live in Alabama, Alabama wants to make sure everyone is counted because that determines how many House Representatives that they get. So, just make a note for that. That is based on state population. This becomes known as the Great Compromise. You're going to have two parts to Congress. One part based with state number, other one based with state population. Now, if you're going to propose a law, does it have to pass the Senate or the House or both?
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's okay, we haven't talked about this quite yet in government. Does anyone know? Okay.
Both.
Both. That way you can't have just the people overrun the small states, and you can't have the small states just ignore what the people want. So it's a good balance for it. Alright, so just make a note for that with the Great Compromise. Other compromises. We start to see trouble with the idea of North versus South. This will steadily escalate until we get to the Civil War. This one is with the 3/5 compromise. The southern states said, oh, if we're basing off state population, we want to count our slaves as a number of people so we get more votes, but not for taxes, because they're not real people. The North said, oh no, if you want to count them as property, we want to count them as taxes. But if they're property, then they don't count for state population. So both sides are arguing to decide, okay, which one will win out. Now, keep in mind, they are trying to make a working government. So it's not like the Founding Fathers supported slavery or were ignoring slavery. The Founding Fathers said we were going to address this later on, but we need to come up with a temporary solution right now. So they were going to address a lot of the slavery issues later, but they wanted to make a document as best as they could, so that way, they could address it and not having to fight wars. The Founding Fathers never wanted us to have a civil war, so they're hoping that we would steadily get away from ideas like this peacefully later. That's what kind of came up with almost a 3/5 compromise. Now the idea of 3/5 of the slave population. It's not 3/5 of a slave. Sometimes I get that question. Okay, that's not what it's talking about. You're not dividing up slaves into 5 pieces and dividing up. That's not what it means. So 3/5 population. Established that the slave population will be counted for taxation and representation. But it's not the idea that the Founding Fathers supported slavery. Sometimes people think that. They just said, this is a temporary solution. We will readdress this and hopefully change this later on. But we have to work out a compromise between North and South. We will readdress this later. Alright, you see the same thing with the Commerce and Slave Trade Compromise. The northern states, they wanted to establish tariffs. This is the first time your book officially introduces the word tariff. Anyone know what a tariff is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't it the import tax?
Yeah, so basically it's taxing on goods being sold in the United States. It's to help protect America's manufacturing. So if you have an American merchant that's making hats, it's basically charge a tax on hats coming from the British Isles to make sure that the merchant's hats can be sold at a slightly lower value. So that was one part of it, but the southern states in particular were worried that they would start taxing the importation of slaves and trying to limit slavery in the United States South. And so that's one reason why they were balking at that idea. Alright, so the Founding Fathers, they passed the Commerce and Slave Trade Compromise. It said, okay, it could not levy export taxes or on selling to another nation. So for the South, as they're selling agriculture, not quite cotton yet, but we're getting there. As they're selling agriculture, you can't be taxed for that. And you cannot regulate the slave trade until 1808. They put that date in there on purpose because they were hoping in 20 years we can readdress this, and then hopefully everyone will be shifting away from slavery by this point. It'll be easier to get rid of. Now again, the Founding Fathers, they can't see the future, so they didn't know. But they were hoping at the time period, okay, 20 years, we'll have a president, we'll have a Congress, we can vote and get rid of it, hopefully then. So it wasn't like the Founding Fathers wanted slavery. They said, nope, we're just postponing the decision on this for right now. We will come back to this. So they're saying, okay, as of right now, just to keep the peace, because we gotta have a constitution. You okay there, Brecken? Sorry, Brecken.
Nice.
Okay, so just keep that in mind. So those two compromises were other important ones. Just the Founding Fathers saying, okay, here's temporary solutions, but we're hoping later on we can vote and change these later on for it. So because of that, it's known as the bundle of compromises, because there are many other compromises made in this period of history. Alright, anyone have any questions about this so far? Alright, so the Electoral College, your book introduces this as a side note as well. They did not, okay, does anyone know how the president gets elected? You're going to hear more about this as we approach November 4th. Okay, but how does he get elected?
People often misconcept that
Okay.
their votes are what necessarily get him in.
Good job.
But it's the electoral college.
It is the Electoral College. Now, how does the Electoral College get chosen? Like, what is that?
They're voted in.
Partly, not quite.
But they're also, it's half Democrat, half Republican, right?
No, it's okay. We're gonna watch a video about that one too as well. So the Electoral College, what they do is they said, okay, we do not have a popular election in the United States. A popular election is whenever everyone votes, whoever gets the most votes become president. That's not how it works in the United States. In the United States, it is determined by, okay, with your state, which party you're voting for, because this is based on a two-party system for it. And those three people's party, they get to choose the electors. So if the Republicans get the most votes, they're going to choose Republican electors. If the Democrats get the most votes, they're going to choose Democratic electors. So each side will choose their own. So it's based on the idea of the number of electors that your state gets is determined on your number of senators and number of House of Representatives. That's also why your state wanted to make sure you voted in the census, because that also determines the number of electors later. So they want to make sure that everyone is counted as much as possible. So make note of the Electoral College. This is whenever the voters, they play an indirect voting or an indirect method of choosing the president. They wanted the people's ideas, but they were worried about just mob rule because there's some problems with just the idea of everyone voting. So we're going to talk about it and watch videos about it. Okay, yes, Mrs.
So if it was like that, where people would vote and ask who vote for president based on like the past vote, doesn't that mean technically that probably Hillary Clinton would have won because she got the popular vote?
If it was based on popular vote, did she get the popular vote? I thought they decided ultimately everybody that it was still Trump. It's been a long time.
It was still Trump.
I heard that it was like Hillary.
Because Hillary just got the big states, but Trump won the majority.
It's one of those, like I said, you hear about both of the popular election. Now, I think it looks like she was going to win popular election for a long time. I was going to say that. But ultimately, when they finally finished counting everyone, okay, no, it's popular. That's what come hear people talk about it. But no, there's problems with doing a popular vote, and we'll watch a video about why it is. So this is the first video, just explaining what the Electoral College does first. And then we're going to watch the second video. Probably Monday, because we're running out of time. Watch the second one. Alright, Chris, you get the lights again really quick.
I want to talk to you about the Electoral College and why it matters. Alright, I know this doesn't sound like the most sensational topic of the day, but stay with me because I promise you it's one of the most important. To explain why requires a very brief civics review. The President and Vice President of the United States are not chosen by a nationwide popular vote of the American people. Rather, they are chosen by 538 electors. This process is spelled out in the United States Constitution. Why didn't the founders just make it easy and let the presidential candidate with the most votes claim victory? Why did they create, and why do we continue to need this Electoral College? The answer is critical to understanding not only the Electoral College, but also America. The founders had no intention of creating a pure majority rule democracy. They knew from careful study of history what most have forgotten today or never learned. Pure democracies do not work. They implode. Democracy has been colorfully described as two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. In a pure democracy, bare majorities can easily tyrannize the rest of the country. The founders wanted to avoid this at all costs. This is why we have three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. It's why each state has 2 senators, no matter what its population, but also different numbers of representatives based entirely on population. It's why it takes a supermajority in Congress and 3/4 of the states to change the Constitution. And it's why we have the Electoral College. Here's how the Electoral College works. The presidential election happens in 2 phases. The first phase is purely democratic. We hold 51 popular elections every presidential election year, 1 in each state and 1 in DC. On election day in 2012, you may have thought you were voting for Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, but you were really voting for a slate of presidential electors. In Rhode Island, for example, if you voted for Barack Obama, you voted for the state's 4 Democratic electors. If you voted for Mitt Romney, you were really voting for the state's 4 Republican electors. Part 2 of the election is held in December, and it is this December election among the state's 538 electors, not the November election, which officially determines the identity of the next president. At least 270 votes are needed to win. Why is this so important? Because the system encourages coalition building and national campaigning. In order to win, a candidate must have the support of many different types of voters from various parts of the country. Winning only the South or the Midwest is not good enough. You cannot win 270 electoral votes if only one part of the country is supporting you. But if winning were only about getting the most votes, a candidate might concentrate all of his efforts in the biggest cities or the biggest states. Why would that candidate care about what people in West Virginia or Iowa or Montana think? But you might ask, isn't the election really only about the so-called swing states? Actually, no. If nothing else, safe and swing states are constantly changing. California voted safely Republican as recently as 1988. Texas used to vote Democrat. Neither New Hampshire nor Virginia used to be swing states. Most people think that George W. Bush won the 2000 election because of Florida. Well, sort of, but he really won the election because he managed to flip one state which the Democrats thought was safe, West Virginia. Its 4 electoral votes turned out to be decisive. No political party can ignore any state for too long without suffering the consequences. Every state, and therefore every voter in every state, is important. The Electoral College also makes it harder to steal elections. Votes must be stolen in the right state in order to change the outcome of the Electoral College. With so many swing states, this is hard to predict and hard to do. But without the Electoral College, any vote stolen in any precinct in the country could affect the national outcome, even if that vote was easily stolen in the bluest California precinct or the reddest Texas one. The Electoral College is an ingenious method of selecting a president for a great, diverse republic such as our own. It protects against the tyranny of the majority, encourages coalition building, and discourages voter fraud. Our founders were proud of it. We can be too. I'm Tara Ross for Prager University.
Alright, so it's just a good video. What? It's just a good video, it just helps showing and it just explains. They did a very good job explaining what it is and why we need it. Watch the other video on Monday, just that.
Everybody thinks.
Wait, raise your hand. Okay.
Everybody thinks the majority vote, but it's really not.
Yeah, it's really that. So it's one of the reasons why it is important that everyone votes. So because it is determined, like Georgia determines their electoral college votes and Alabama determines their own votes. It's one of those that it's important that everyone votes. Alright, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and give your homework for it. Your homework is to read pages 97 through 103. 97 through 103. You'll be okay. You'll be fine. Alright, answer on page 99, 1 through 4, and then on page 103, 1 through 6. So on page, you'll be okay. 99, 1 through 4, and on page 103, 1 through 6. It's just one more question. It'll be okay. Don't forget, preamble quiz is due Wednesday. So keep working on it. Don't forget your first draft is due not this coming Monday, but the next one. You have 2 weekends.
I'm running for president.
You can. That's fine.
I will.
I would vote.
Yay. No promises. No promises.